Welcome to my channel Deep Sleep Mission-DSM. As we begin, I would be delighted if you could share your location in the comments below. It's truly inspiring to witness how far this content travels and to connect with viewers from across the world. They say every ranch in Texas has its secrets, but I never believed it until I inherited one 92 miles from Austin. And before you click away thinking this is just another inheritance story, let me tell you about the cattle that walked backwards, every single one of them. And if you think that's the strangest part, well, you haven't heard about what we found in the old barn last Tuesday. But first, subscribe if you want to hear what happened when we tried to turn them around. Because, trust me, you'll want to know why the previous owner left that note saying, "Never face them forward. Now the story begins." The lawyer's office smelled like old leather and disappointment. That's what I remember most about the day I inherited Uncle Ray's ranch. That, and the way Mr. Henderson kept clearing his throat before he spoke. "Your uncle was particular about his wishes," he said, sliding a manila envelope across the mahogany desk. "There are conditions." I hadn't seen Uncle Ray in 15 years. Not since that Thanksgiving when Dad and him had that fight about something. Nobody ever told me what. Now, here I was, Josh Turner, 32 years old, sitting in a downtown Houston law office, apparently the new owner of a ranch I'd never even visited. "What kind of conditions?" I asked. Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses, cleared his throat again. "You have to live on the property for at least 1 year. You cannot sell the cattle, and you must." He paused, looked at the paper like he couldn't believe what he was reading. "You must maintain their current orientation." "Their what?" "That's all it says. Maintain their current orientation." He shrugged. "Your uncle was eccentric, but the ranch is worth about $3 million, Mr. Turner. The cattle alone. $3 million. I was a freelance graphic designer living in a studio apartment in Dallas. $3 million was everything." I signed the papers. The drive out to the ranch took me through the kind of Texas that tourists never see. Not the big cities or the tourist towns, but the real Texas. The empty Texas. Miles and miles of nothing but scrub brush and fence posts, broken up by the occasional gas station that looked like it hadn't been updated since 1982. The GPS kept trying to take me down roads that didn't exist. Eventually, I just followed Uncle Ray's handwritten directions from the envelope. Turn left at the dead oak, right at the rusted water tower. If you see the abandoned Dairy Queen, you've gone too far. The sun was setting when I finally saw the gate. "Backwards R Ranch," read the sign, with the R literally printed backwards. I thought it was just a design choice. God, I was so naive. The main house sat about a quarter mile from the road. A 2-story farmhouse, white paint peeling, wraparound porch sagging slightly in the middle. But it was the barn that caught my eye. Massive, red, and somehow wrong. I couldn't place why, but looking at it made my stomach turn just a little. I parked my Civic, completely out of place among the ranch equipment, and grabbed my bags. The evening air was thick with the smell of grass and something else. Something sweet and rotten. That's when I saw them, the cattle. There were maybe 30 head in the nearest pasture, and every single one of them was facing away from me. Not unusual, I thought, but then one moved, and my brain just stopped. It walked backwards. Not stumbling, not awkward, but naturally, fluidly. Like that was the way it had always moved. Its head stayed pointed one direction while its body moved the opposite way. Then another one moved, then another. All of them walking backwards. I stood there, bags in hand, mouth open, watching these cattle graze in reverse, their legs moving in that impossible way. One of them backed up to a water trough, lowered its head without turning around, and drank. "You must be Josh." I jumped, nearly dropped my bags. A man stood beside my car, I hadn't heard him approach. Tall, weathered, probably in his 60s, wearing a cowboy hat that had seen better decades. "I'm Tom," he said, not offering his hand. "I've been taking care of the place since Ray passed. He said you'd come." "The cattle," I pointed, still not believing what I was seeing. "Yep," Tom said, like backwards walking cattle were as normal as the sunset. "Been that way since I started working here in '98. Ray said they were like that when he bought the place in '85. But how? Why?" Tom shrugged. "Ray had theories. Never shared them with me. Just said to keep them fed, keep them healthy, and never..." He paused, looked at me with eyes that had seen too much. "Never try to turn them around. What happens if you turn them around?" Tom didn't answer. Just picked up one of my bags and started walking toward the house. "Come on, it's getting dark. You don't want to be outside when it's dark." Not the first night. I followed him, but kept looking back at the cattle. In the dying light, their backwards bodies looked like a glitch in reality. Like someone had taken a video and played it in reverse. "Tom," I called after him. "What happens when it gets dark?" He stopped at the porch steps, turned to look at me. "They walk forward. So? When they walk forward." He shook his head. "Just stay inside after dark, Josh. Your uncle did for 20 years and he lived to 83, that's all you need to know." The inside of the house was exactly what you'd expect from a Texas ranch that hadn't been updated since the Carter administration. Wood paneling, orange shag carpet in the living room, a kitchen with avocado green appliances that probably cost more to run than my rent in Dallas, but it was clean, suspiciously clean. "Maria comes twice a week," Tom explained, seeing me run my finger along a dustless shelf. "Lives in town. Won't stay past 4 p.m. though, nobody will." "Because of the cattle?" "Because of what the cattle mean." He set my bags down by the stairs. "Your bedroom's up there, second door on the right. Ray's room is at the end of the hall. I'd leave that alone for a while. Tom, I need you to explain what's going on here. Cattle don't walk backwards. It's physically impossible." He walked to the window, pulled the curtain aside. The sun had fully set now. In the distance, I could see the dark shapes of the cattle, still in the pasture. "You ever hear of Bent Creek?" he asked. "No. Town that used to be about 10 miles from here, back in the 1950s. Had maybe 300 people. One morning, every single person was gone. Just gone. No bodies, no signs of struggle. Even the dogs were gone. Only thing left was the cattle. These cattle? Their ancestors, maybe. Nobody knows for sure. Ranch changed hands a dozen times before your uncle bought it. Each owner lasted about a year before selling. Except Ray. Ray figured something out. I moved to stand beside him at the window. The cattle were still now, all facing the same direction, away from the house. What did he figure out? How to coexist, feed them at dawn, check them at noon, never interact after dusk, and never. He turned to me and I could see real fear in his eyes. Never go in the old barn. Why? What's in the barn? Before he could answer, something happened that made my blood run cold. Every single one of the cattle turned their heads simultaneously, like synchronized swimmers. They were still facing away from us, but now their heads were tilted, as if listening to something. "Tom, shh." He put his hand on my shoulder, squeezed hard. "Don't move." We stood there, frozen, for what felt like hours, but was probably only seconds. Then, one by one, the cattle began to walk. Forward. The wrongness of it hit me immediately. When they'd walked backwards, it had seemed strange, but almost graceful. This was different. Their legs moved wrong like a broken marionette. Their heads stayed at that unnatural angle. And they were walking toward the barn. "We need to leave." I said, too late, there between us and the cars. Tom's voice was barely a whisper. Just wait. They'll go back after midnight. Go back from where? He didn't answer, just pointed. The cattle had reached the barn, and one by one they were walking through the wall. Not through the door, through the solid wooden wall, like it wasn't there at all. I rubbed my eyes, looked again, but it was real. The cattle were disappearing into the barn, their bodies passing through solid matter like ghosts. This isn't possible. A lot of things aren't possible, Josh. Doesn't stop them from happening. Tom let go of my shoulder. I'm going to make some coffee. It's going to be a long night. I followed him to the kitchen, my mind reeling. He pulled out an old percolator, started measuring coffee grounds with practiced ease. How often does this happen? Every night they walk forward, but they only go through the barn on Tuesdays. Today's Tuesday. Yep. What's in the barn, Tom? He was quiet for a long moment, just the sound of water starting to heat. Ray went in once back in '92, came out 3 hours later with his hair completely white. Never said what he saw, just said the cattle were protecting us from it. Protecting us? From what? From whatever's on the other side. The coffee percolator started its rhythmic bubbling. Outside, I could hear something that sounded like wind chimes. Except we didn't have any wind chimes. Your uncle left you something, Tom said suddenly. He pulled out a small key from his pocket. Said to give it to you after you saw them walk forward. It's for the desk in his study, 3rd drawer down. I took the key. It was warm, too warm. Tom, I need to know everything. No more cryptic hints. What happened to the people from Bent Creek? What's in the barn? Why do the cattle walk backwards? He poured 2 cups of coffee, handed me one. Read Ray's journals first. Then, if you still want to know, I'll tell you what I've seen. But Josh, he looked at me over his steaming mug. Some knowledge you can't unlearn. And once you know the truth about this place, you're part of it forever. Uncle Ray's study was exactly what you'd expect from a Texas rancher. If that rancher was also investigating paranormal phenomena. Taxidermied deer heads shared wall space with topographical maps covered in red string. A gun rack sat next to a bookshelf filled with titles like Dimensional Rifts in Rural America and Cattle, the Interdimensional Harbinger. The desk was massive, oak, with dozens of tiny drawers and compartments. The key Tom gave me fit the 3rd drawer on the right. Inside were 3 leather journals and a cassette tape labeled Play Only If They Face Forward. I picked up the first journal, dated 1985. September 3rd, 1985. Bought the ranch today. Previous owner, Mr. Dalton, couldn't leave fast enough. Kept muttering about the backward ones and Tuesday nights. Thought he was drunk. Cattle seem fine, though they all face the same direction. Odd. September 7th, 1985. First Tuesday night. I understand now. The cattle. Dear God, they walked through the barn wall. All of them. And the sound from inside, like 1,000 voices singing backward. I've made a terrible mistake. I flipped forward. October 15th, 1985. Found the remains of Bent Creek today. The entire town square is covered in backward footprints. Hoofprints walking in reverse from the center outward. Whatever happened here in 1952 started at the exact center of town. There's still a hole there. Goes down further than my flashlight can reach. November 1st, 1985. The cattle are guardians. I'm sure of it now. They walk backward to confuse it, to keep it from knowing which direction leads to our world. When they walk forward on Tuesday nights, they're checking the barrier, making sure it holds. The entries became more frantic as the years went on. March 22nd, 1990. Tried to film them today. Camera showed nothing but static when pointed at the cattle. But in the static, I swear I saw faces, human faces, screaming. July 18th, 1992. I went in the barn. God help me, I went in. I know what happened to Bent Creek. They're still alive, all of them, on the other side, and they're trying to come back. The cattle won't let them. The cattle know what they became. December 24th, 1999. One of the cattle died today. When Tom and I went to bury it, we found something inside, where its heart should have been. A human hand, still warm, still grasping. Tom doesn't know. I buried it separately. I set down the journal. My hands were shaking. Outside, I could hear those wind chimes again. Except now, I realized it wasn't wind chimes. It was singing. Faint, distant, backward singing. The second journal was filled with technical drawings, diagrams of the barn, measurements, electromagnetic readings, pages and pages of numbers that meant nothing to me. But one page stood out. A map of the ranch with concentric circles drawn from the barn outward. Each circle was labeled with a date. The circles were getting bigger. The third journal was different, newer. The last entry was dated just a week before Uncle Ray died. August 15th, 2023. Josh will inherit the ranch. My brother's boy. Smart kid from what I remember, he'll need to be. The circles are expanding faster now. The cattle can't hold them back much longer. Maybe a year, maybe less. He'll need to make a choice. Feed the barrier or break it. Both options are horrible. I'm sorry, Josh. I'm so sorry for what I'm leaving you. The cassette will explain everything. But only play it if they face forward. If they all face forward at the same time, it means the barrier has failed. It means they're coming through. I looked out the study window. The cattle were still gone, still in the barn, or through it, or wherever they went on Tuesday nights. I picked up the cassette, turned it over in my hands. A simple TDK tape, the kind everyone used in the 80s. Play only if they face forward, written in Uncle Ray's shaky handwriting. Tom knocked on the door. It's midnight. They're coming back. I joined him at the living room window. One by one, the cattle were emerging from the barn wall, walking backward again, their normal, impossible gait. They spread out across the pasture, resuming their eternal reverse patrol. "Tom," I said, "what really happened to the people from Bent Creek?" He was quiet for a long moment. "You read the journals?" "Yes." "Then you know as much as Ray did. Maybe more than you should." He said they're still alive. On the other side, Tom nodded slowly. "Every Tuesday, I hear them calling out, begging to come home. But they can't come home, Josh. Not anymore." "Why not?" "Because they're not people anymore. Haven't been for 70 years. The thing in the barn, the thing the cattle guard against, it doesn't just take you, it changes you. Makes you into something that looks human, sounds human, but..." He shuddered. "Ray saw them. Just once. Said their faces were on backward. Said they were walking on the ceiling. Said they were hungry. Hungry for what? For everyone else. I didn't sleep that night. Or the next. Or the next. By Friday, I was running on coffee and fear, jumping at every sound, checking the windows obsessively to make sure the cattle were still walking backward. Tom stayed during the days, teaching me the routine. Feed at dawn, exactly 6:47 a.m., never earlier, never later. Check the fence at noon. Count them at 3 p.m. Always 33, never more, never less. "What happens if there's more?" I asked. Then something came through, and we run. "What happens if there's less?" Then one went through, and we pray it was enough. Saturday morning, I found a dead calf in the field. Tom and I loaded it into his truck, drove it to a spot he knew about 5 miles away. When we cut it open to check for disease, we found what Uncle Ray had described, where its heart should have been a human hand. But not just any hand. It was wearing a wedding ring with an inscription, Bent Creek Methodist Church, June 15th, 1951. "We bury this," Tom said. "We don't talk about it, and we don't think about who it belonged to." But I couldn't stop thinking about it. The people of Bent Creek, trapped for 70 years, slowly being digested by cattle that walked backward to keep them contained. It was insane. It was impossible. It was happening. Sunday night, I made a decision. I had to see inside the barn. I waited until Tom left, waited until the sun set, waited until the cattle began their forward walk. Then I followed them. Up close, the wrongness was even more apparent. Their joints bent in ways that hurt to watch. Their eyes reflected light that wasn't there, and the sound, God, the sound of their breathing was like voices trying to form words. They walked through the barn wall, and I stood there, hand on the door handle, heart pounding. Uncle Ray had gone in. He'd survived, but his hair had turned white. I opened the door. The inside of the barn was normal. Hay bales, old farm equipment, the smell of rust and age. But the cattle weren't there. The 33 cattle that had just walked through the wall weren't inside. Then I saw it. In the center of the barn floor, a hole, perfect circle, about 10 feet across. The edges were smooth, like glass, and from deep inside came a light, a pale, sick, yellow light that pulsed like a heartbeat. I approached slowly, looked down. The hole didn't go down. It went elsewhere. I could see the cattle, walking along what looked like the underside of the ground, their backward feet finding purchase on nothing. And beyond them, Bent Creek, the entire town, suspended in that yellow void. Buildings hanging at impossible angles. Streets that twisted back on themselves. And the people, they saw me looking. All 300 of them turned their backward faces up, 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 to stare at me with eyes where their mouths should be. They opened their eye mouths and screamed in harmony. A sound that was also a color, that was also a smell, that was also a memory of being born and dying simultaneously. One of them started climbing, using fingers that bent the wrong way to dig into the nothing between here and there. It wore a sheriff's uniform from the 1950s. Its badge said "Protect and Serve," but the letters were backward and bleeding. I ran. I burst out of the barn and ran straight into Tom, who was standing there with a shotgun. "Damn fool," he said, but he wasn't pointing the gun at me. He was pointing it at the barn. "Did it see you?" They all saw me. Not them, it. "Did I see you?" Before I could ask what he meant, something else came through the barn wall. Not a cow, not a person. Something that was the idea of both and neither. It stood 20 feet tall, its body a constantly shifting mass of backward-walking legs and forward-facing eyes. It had 1,000 mouths, and all of them were singing that backward song. Tom fired. The shotgun blast did nothing except make it notice us. "Run," Tom said. "Get to the house. Get the cassette." "What about you?" "I've got 3 more shells. That'll buy you maybe 5 minutes. Go." I ran. Behind me, I heard 3 more shots. Then silence. Then Tom screaming. Then Tom laughing. Then Tom singing backward. I grabbed the cassette from the study, my hands shaking so badly I almost dropped it. Outside, the thing was moving toward the house. The cattle were following it, but they were struggling, their backward walk becoming erratic, confused. I shoved the cassette into the old boombox in the living room, hit play. Uncle Ray's voice filled the room. "Josh, if you're playing this, then they're all facing forward. The barrier has failed, but there's a way to reset it. In the basement, yes, there's a basement behind the pantry. There's a lever. Pull it, and the ranch will shift. Not move, shift. 1 degree out of phase with reality. Bent Creek will lose its anchor. The cattle will walk backward again. But the thing was at the window now, its 1,000 eyes looking in. But you'll shift too. You'll be alone. No one will be able to see the ranch anymore. No one will be able to find you. You'll be the guardian now. You and the cattle, walking backward through time, keeping the door closed. Forever. The window shattered. Those 1,000 mouths began singing louder. Or you can run. Leave the ranch. Let them through. Let Bent Creek return. But they're not people anymore, Josh. There's something hungry and wrong, and they'll spread. Town by town, backward walking infections, until the whole world walks in reverse. The choice is yours. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The tape ended. The thing reached through the window. I ran to the pantry, found the hidden door, practically fell down the stairs. The basement was small, concrete, empty except for a single lever on the far wall. Red handle, covered in warnings in languages I didn't recognize. Behind me, I could hear it coming down the stairs. Its backward song getting louder. I pulled the lever. The world twisted. Not turned, not spun, twisted, like reality was a wet towel being wrung out. I felt my atoms trying to go in directions that didn't exist. I tasted purple and heard the smell of tomorrow dying yesterday. Then, silence. I climbed back upstairs. The thing was gone. The window was intact. Outside, 33 cattle walked backward through the pasture. Their eternal patrol resumed. But the world beyond the ranch, it was different, faded, like looking through frosted glass. I could see the road, see cars passing, but they couldn't see me. I walked to the gate, tried to step through. I couldn't. The boundary held me as surely as it held the cattle. I've been here for 3 months now. Tom never came back. Or maybe he's still here, 1 degree out of phase, screaming where I can't hear him. Maria doesn't come to clean anymore. No one comes. Just me and the backward cattle, holding the line against Bent Creek. Sometimes, on Tuesday nights, I stand at the window and watch them walk through the barn. Sometimes I hear the singing from the other side. Sometimes I see lights in the sky that shouldn't be there, and I wonder if there are other ranches, other guardians, other backward-walking cattle keeping other hungering towns at bay. I found a way to post this story. The internet still works somehow, bleeding through the phase shift. Maybe you'll read this and think it's fiction. Maybe that's better. But if you're ever driving through Texas, 92 miles from Austin, and you see a sign for the Backwards R Ranch, keep driving, don't stop, don't look too close. Because if you see the cattle walking backward, you might notice they're not cattle at all. They're the people who tried to leave. And I'm one of them now, walking backward through time, keeping you safe, making sure Bent Creek never comes home, making sure nothing else gets out or in. Actually, you know what? Comment below if you've ever seen cattle walking strangely, or if you've driven past a ranch that seemed wrong. Because I don't think we're the only one. I think there are more places like this, more guardians, more backward walkers. And if you're one of them, if you're trapped like me, walking backward to keep the world walking forward, just know you're not alone. We're all walking backward together, forever. Subscribe if you want to know what happened to Tom, because last night I heard knocking from inside the barn, and it sounded like Morse code. It sounded like help. But that's a story for next time, if there is a next time, if the barrier holds. Story number 2. The marina's security footage would later show 17 boats returning to their slips that October night, but not a single person stepping off any of them. Not one. I know because I watched that footage myself, frame by frame, searching for answers that would never come. but I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me tell you what really happened at Marina del Rey, and why I can never go near the water again. Before you hear this story, I need you to understand something. What I'm about to tell you is true, every word. And if you live anywhere near the California coast, especially near Marina del Rey, you need to listen carefully. Because those boats, they're still there. Still bobbing gently in their slips. Still waiting. And sometimes, late at night, they still leave on their own. The story begins now. My name is Jack Morrison. And until 3 weeks ago, I was the night security guard at Marina del Rey. 23 years on the job. 23 years of quiet nights, watching the boats rock gently in their slips, listening to the halyards ping against the masts in the wind. It was peaceful work, honest work. The kind of job where the biggest excitement was catching teenagers trying to sneak aboard the yachts for Instagram photos. That changed on October 15th. I remember the exact time because I just checked my watch. 11:47 p.m. I was doing my rounds near the fuel dock when Miguel, the other guard on duty, called me on the radio. His voice was strange. Not panicked, exactly, but confused, like he was trying to solve a puzzle in his head. "Jack, you need to come to Slip 17 now. What's going on?" There was a pause. A long one. Then, "The Cassandra's dream just came back." I stopped walking. The Cassandra's dream was Dr. Harrison's 40-foot sailboat. Beautiful vessel, classic lines. And Dr. Harrison had left with his wife that morning for a weekend trip to Catalina Island. I'd helped them cast off myself, watched them motor out past the breakwater. "What do you mean it came back? Did they have engine trouble?" Another pause. "Jack, there's nobody on board." I ran, not walked, ran. My feet pounding on the wooden dock, the sound echoing across the dark water. When I reached Slip 17, Miguel was standing there with his flashlight trained on the boat. The Cassandra's dream was perfectly docked, lines secured, fenders in place, engine off, everything exactly as it should be. Except the deck was empty. "Maybe they went to the restroom," I suggested. But even as I said it, I knew something was wrong. You don't leave a boat like that without at least one person staying aboard. It's basic seamanship. Miguel shook his head. "I've been here 20 minutes. Called out, no answer." We boarded the vessel, announcing ourselves loudly. "Dr. Harrison? Mrs. Harrison? Marina Security?" Nothing. The cabin was neat, too neat. Coffee cups sat on the galley counter, still warm. Half-eaten sandwiches on the table. The VHF radio was on, softly crackling with static. The GPS showed they'd made it to Catalina, anchored in Avalon Harbor for 6 hours, then came straight back. But the strangest thing? The autopilot was engaged. The boat had navigated itself home, threaded through the channel, avoided other vessels, and docked itself perfectly in its slip. That's not possible. Autopilots don't work like that. They can hold a course, sure, but they can't dock a boat. They can't tie lines. They can't... Miguel touched my shoulder. I jumped. "Jack, look." He was pointing at the harbor. At first, I didn't understand what I was seeing. Then, one by one, I began to count them. Boats, coming in from the darkness beyond the breakwater. Moving slowly, purposefully, each one heading to its designated slip. The Moonlight Serenade in Slip 22. The Second Wind in Slip 31. The Endless Summer in Slip 45. All boats that had left that morning, all returning now, at the exact same time, like they'd been called home. We stood there, frozen, watching as each vessel maneuvered perfectly into place. No voices, no movement on deck, Just the soft rumble of engines and the gentle splash of water against hulls. "How many?" I whispered. Miguel was already checking his log. His hand shook as he ran his finger down the list of departures. 17 boats left today for overnight trips. We watched the last one. A beautiful catamaran called Paradise Found glide into slip 78. The engines died, the navigation lights clicked off, and then silence. The entire marina was silent. Even the usual sounds, the cry of seagulls, the lap of waves, the creak of dock lines. Everything had stopped. It was like the world was holding its breath. "We need to call the Coast Guard," Miguel said. I nodded, but I couldn't move, because I was looking at the water between the boats. It was wrong. The surface was too smooth, too perfect, like black glass. And beneath it, just for a second, I thought I saw something move, something large, something that had no business being in a marina. The Coast Guard arrived at 12:31 a.m. By then, Miguel and I had checked 3 more boats, all the same. Personal belongings in place. No signs of struggle. No blood. No notes. Just empty. Like everyone had simply stepped off the edge of the world. Lieutenant Sarah Chen led the investigation. Young, maybe 30, but sharp. She didn't waste time with theories or speculation, just facts. When did the first boat return? 11:47 p.m. How long until the last one? Maybe 15 minutes. They came in waves. Waves? Groups, 3 or 4 at a time. She made notes in a small waterproof notebook. Behind her, Coast Guard personnel were boarding each vessel, taking photos, collecting evidence. Their voices carried across the water, tense and professional. "Lieutenant," one of them called out, "you need to see this." We followed her to the Winston's wake, a 50-foot motor yacht in slip 55. The guardsman was in the pilot house, pointing at the navigation computer. "Look at the track," he said. The screen showed the boat's path for the day, out through the channel, north along the coast. Then, at 8:17 p.m., the track just stopped. The GPS had continued recording, but the position never changed. For 2 hours, the boat had remained perfectly still, 30 miles offshore. Then, at 10:19 p.m., it started moving again, straight back to Marina del Rey. "Check the others," Lieutenant Chen ordered. They did. Every single boat showed the same pattern. Different locations, but all between 20 and 40 miles offshore. All stopping at exactly 8:17 p.m., all resuming at exactly 10:19 p.m. "What's out there?" I asked. At those coordinates, Lieutenant Chen pulled up a chart on her tablet. Nothing. Open ocean. 3,000 feet of water. But that wasn't quite true, and we both knew it, because every sailor in Southern California knew the stories about that stretch of water. The place where the continental shelf drops off into the abyss, where strange currents meet, where compasses spin, where boats disappear. The graveyard, some called it. "I need to make some calls," Lieutenant Chen said. But before she could reach for her radio, something happened that made us all freeze. A phone rang, not a harsh electronic ringtone, but an old-fashioned bell ring. It was coming from the Cassandra's Dream, from below deck, Dr. Harrison's boat. We looked at each other, then, slowly, we made our way back to slip 17. The phone rang again, and again. Miguel found it in the forward cabin, an old rotary phone, the kind that hadn't been made in decades, the kind that needed a landline connection. But there were no phone lines on a boat, no way for it to work. It rang again. "Don't," I started to say, but Lieutenant Chen had already picked up the receiver. "Hello." Her face changed immediately. The color drained from her cheeks. Her hand tightened on the phone until her knuckles went white. "Who is this?" she demanded. Then, softer, "That's not possible. You're—" She dropped the phone. It clattered on the cabin sole, the receiver spinning on its cord. We could hear a voice coming from it. Faint, distorted, but unmistakably human. "Sarah, Sarah, come find us. We're waiting. Down here in the dark. So many of us now. Come find us. The water's warm. Sarah." Lieutenant Chen backed away. That was my sister. My sister Rebecca. But she drowned 3 years ago, during a diving trip, right around those coordinates. The phone kept talking. Different voices now, men, women, children, all calling names, all asking people to come find them, all saying the water was warm. Miguel reached down and yanked the phone from the wall. There was no connection, no wires, just an old phone that couldn't possibly work, still whispering names through its dead receiver. What I haven't told you yet is what happened the day after. The day when I started to understand that this wasn't just about missing boats or strange phone calls. This was about something much older, much hungrier, much more patient than any of us could imagine. I went home that morning, exhausted, but I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those 17 boats gliding through the darkness. So, I did what any rational person would do. I started researching. My laptop glowed in the dark apartment as I typed search after search. Marina del Rey missing boats, Pacific Ocean disappearances, Maritime Mysteries, California. Each query led me deeper down a rabbit hole that I wish I'd never started digging. The first thing I found was a newspaper clipping from 1965. Yacht vanishes in clear weather. The Sea Serpent, a 30-foot sloop, had disappeared 20 miles off Marina del Rey. The boat was found 3 days later, tied to a buoy near the harbor entrance. No crew, no explanation. But it was the photograph that made my blood run cold. There, in grainy black and white, was a picture of the recovered vessel, and standing on the dock beside it, a man in a Coast Guard uniform. The caption read, "Lieutenant Harold Chen examines the abandoned yacht." Chen, like Lieutenant Sarah Chen, the same last name. I kept digging, found more articles, more disappearances, and in each one, somewhere in the investigation, there was always a Chen. Different first names, different generations, but always someone from the same family. Always asking the same questions. Always failing to find answers. It was like the ocean had been calling them back for decades. My phone buzzed. Text message from Miguel. "Can't sleep either. Found something weird. Meet me at Denny's on Lincoln." I grabbed my keys. Miguel was already there when I arrived, hunched over a cup of coffee that looked like it had been sitting untouched for hours. His eyes were red-rimmed and haunted. "I've been thinking about that phone," he said, without preamble. "About the voices." I slid into the booth across from him. "Yeah?" My grandmother used to tell stories. Old stories from Mexico, about places where the dead don't rest, where they call to the living. He looked up at me. She called them pozos de almas, soul wells. "What are you talking about, Miguel?" "Deep places in the ocean where something feeds, where the barriers between life and death get thin. The dead don't move on. They gather, and they get hungry for company." I wanted to laugh, tell him he was being ridiculous, but I'd heard those voices on the phone. I'd seen those boats moving without crews. "There's more," Miguel continued. "I called my cousin Elena. She works for the harbor master's office in San Pedro. I asked her about boat disappearances, strange incidents. She said there's been talk for years about certain coordinates, places where boats go missing, where the water gets weird." He pulled out a folded piece of paper, coordinates written in shaky handwriting. These are the spots, Jack. All of them. From San Diego to San Francisco. Every major disappearance in the last 50 years. I looked at the numbers. They meant nothing to me, just degrees and minutes on a chart. But Miguel had drawn lines between them on a rough map of the California coast. The lines formed a pattern. Almost like it's a spiral, I whispered. Yeah, and it's getting tighter. Closer to shore. Like whatever's out there is moving inward. We sat in silence for a long moment. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. A truck rumbled past on Lincoln Boulevard. Normal sounds. Normal life. But nothing felt normal anymore. Miguel, what if Lieutenant Chen's sister didn't just drown? What if she was taken? He nodded slowly. And what if this has been happening to the Chen family for generations? My phone rang. Both of us jumped. The caller ID showed Marina Del Rey Harbor Patrol. Jack, it's Lieutenant Chen. I need you and Miguel to come back to the marina. Now. What's wrong? There was static on the line. Or maybe not static, maybe something else. Something that sounded like whispers. The boats, Jack. The 17 boats. They're not empty anymore. The line went dead. Miguel and I looked at each other across the table. Outside, it was still dark. The kind of deep, pre-dawn darkness that makes everything feel temporary. Fragile. We don't have to go, Miguel said quietly. But we both knew we did. Because sometimes the water calls, and you can't ignore it forever. We paid for coffee we hadn't drunk, and drove back to Marina Del Rey through empty streets. The only sounds were our engines and the distant crash of waves against the breakwater. When we arrived, the marina looked different. Wrong, somehow. The lights seemed dimmer, the shadows deeper. And there was a smell in the air, salt and seaweed and something else. Something organic. Something that had been underwater for a very long time. Lieutenant Chen was waiting for us at the harbor master's office. She looked like she'd aged 10 years in the past few hours. Her uniform was wrinkled. Her hands shook as she handed us each a flashlight. "They're back," she said simply. "All of them. Dr. Harrison, his wife, everyone who disappeared. They're standing on their boats, just standing there, waiting." We followed her down the main dock. Our footsteps echoed in the pre-dawn silence, and as we got closer to the slips, I could see them, 43 people, standing perfectly still on the decks of 17 boats. Their clothes were dry, their hair neat. They looked exactly as they had when they'd left that morning. Except for their eyes were black. Not just the pupils, the entire eye. Black as deep water. Black as the space between stars. And they were all looking at us. Dr. Harrison raised his hand. Not waving exactly, more like beckoning. "They've been like this for 2 hours," Lieutenant Chen whispered. "Just standing. Watching, waiting." "Waiting for what?" Miguel asked. But I thought I knew, because I could feel it now. That pull, that tide in my chest, drawing me toward the water, toward slip 17. I reached into my pocket without thinking. My fingers closed around something cold, something metal. A key, a boat key with a little floating keychain that said slip 17. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw those boats gliding through the darkness. Perfect formation. Empty decks. Like ghost ships from an old sailor's tale. By morning, the news had broken. 17 boats. 43 people missing. The largest mass disappearance in California maritime history. The media descended on Marina Del Rey like vultures. Cameras everywhere. Reporters pushing microphones in anyone's face who'd talk. But they didn't know what we knew. They didn't know about the phone. Lieutenant Chen had confiscated it, along with everything else from the boats. But Miguel and I, we'd heard those voices. We knew this wasn't just a missing persons case. This was something else, something worse. I went home around noon, exhausted, confused, scared. My apartment was only a few blocks from the marina, close enough to smell the salt air, close enough to hear the boats. I made coffee, sat at my kitchen table, and opened my laptop. Started searching. Missing boats, Marina del Rey, Southern California, Pacific Ocean. The results made my blood run cold. 1973. The siren's call vanished with 6 people aboard. Boat found drifting near Marina del Rey. No crew. 1981, The Westward Dream. 4 people. Same story. 1989, The Pacific Rose. 7 people. 1997, The Midnight Sun. 3 people. 2005, The Crystal Tide. 5 people. 2013, The Forever Young. 2 people. Every 8 years. Almost exactly. And always in October. I kept digging, found old newspaper articles, Coast Guard reports, insurance claims. The boats were always found within a day or 2. Always in perfect condition. Always empty. But here's the thing that made my hands shake as I read. The boats were found at their home ports, tied up in their slips, exactly where they belonged. Just like now. I called Miguel. You need to see this. We met at a coffee shop on Washington Boulevard. Away from the cameras. Away from the chaos. I showed him what I'd found. Every 8 years, he said slowly, like clockwork. And it's not just Marina del Rey. Look, I pulled up more articles. San Diego, Santa Barbara, Monterey, even up in San Francisco. Different marinas, but the same pattern. Boats leaving, boats returning empty, always in October, always 8 years apart. But these are different locations, Miguel said. How can it be connected? I showed him a map I'd made, marked all the incidents with red dots, drew lines from each marina to the last known position of the boats. They all converged on the same area, that same stretch of deep water, the graveyard. Miguel's phone buzzed, text from his wife, then another, then another. They found something, he said, reading. One of the missing people, a fisherman, pulled them up in his net about 20 miles offshore. My heart jumped. Alive? Miguel's face was pale. No, and Jack, the body, it's been in the water for years, maybe decades, but the dental records, they match. It's Tom Morrison from the Second Wind. He went missing this morning, but the body is old. The coffee shop suddenly felt too small, too crowded, too normal for what we were discussing. We need to go back to the marina, I said. Why? Because if this happens every 8 years, and if the pattern holds, then those 17 boats, they're going to leave again, tonight. We got back to the marina at 4 p.m. The circus was still in full swing, reporters, cops, Coast Guard, all swarming around. But Lieutenant Chen found us immediately, pulled us aside. We've recovered 12 bodies, she said quietly, all in various states of decomposition, all matching the missing people. But some of these bodies, they've been dead for years. The medical examiner is confused. Lieutenant, I said, those boats are going to leave again tonight. She looked at me sharply. What are you talking about? I explained about the pattern, the 8-year cycle, the history. She listened, her face growing more concerned with each detail. We've had boats under guard all day, she said. Nobody's touched them. Doesn't matter. They'll leave on their own, just like they came back. She wanted to argue. I could see it in her eyes. But she'd heard that phone. She'd heard her dead sister's voice. What do you suggest? Clear the marina. Everyone, get them away from the water." She made the call. By 7 p.m., Marina del Rey was empty except for essential personnel. Coast Guard cutters blocked the channel. Helicopters circled overhead. Every slip was under surveillance. Miguel and I posted ourselves on the fuel dock. Best view of the harbor. We could see all 17 boats from there, bobbing gently in the dying light. The sun set at 7:23 p.m. The automatic lights came on, casting yellow pools across the dark water. Everything looked normal, peaceful even. Then, at exactly 8:17 p.m., the boats began to move. No engines, no sails. They just drifted backward out of their slips, all 17, moving in perfect synchronization. The radio exploded with chatter, Coast Guard personnel shouting coordinates, helicopters sweeping their searchlights across the water. But the boats kept moving, sliding through the water like they were being pulled by invisible threads. "Stop them!" Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "Block the channel!" The Coast Guard cutter moved to intercept, but the boats just went around it, through it. I don't know how else to describe it. 1 second the cutter was in their path, the next, the boats were on the other side, like they'd passed through solid steel. We ran along the dock, following the procession. The boats were picking up speed now, heading for the breakwater, for the open ocean. And as they moved, I saw something that made my blood freeze. People. Standing on the decks. Dozens of them. Men in old-fashioned sailing clothes. Women in dresses from the 70s. Children, all standing perfectly still, facing forward, their skin pale as moonlight. "Do you see them?" Miguel gasped. I nodded, couldn't speak. The boats passed the breakwater, disappeared into the darkness. The helicopters followed, searchlights sweeping back and forth. But within minutes, the radio chatter changed. Lost visual. They're gone. How is that possible? They just vanished. Lieutenant Chen found us on the dock. Her face was grim. "We have bigger problems," she said. "The bodies we recovered? They're gone. Disappeared from the morgue. And," she paused, looked out at the dark water. "And what?" I asked. "We've been getting calls from other marinas, all up and down the coast. Boats are leaving, hundreds of them, all heading to the same coordinates." The three of us stood there, watching the empty slips, listening to the water lap against the pilings, waiting. At 10:19 p.m., they came back. Not just our 17, all of them. Every boat that had disappeared over the decades. Hundreds of vessels, emerging from the darkness like a ghost fleet. Old boats, new boats, sailboats, motor yachts. Even a few old fishing trawlers that hadn't been seen since the 60s. They filled every empty slip, rafted up 3 and 4 deep. An impossible flotilla of lost vessels, all returning home at once, and on every deck, the missing people stood, watching us, waiting. Dr. Harrison was there, on the Cassandra's Dream, his wife beside him. They looked exactly the same, except for their eyes. Their eyes were black, completely black, like the deep ocean at night. One by one, they began to walk, stepping off their boats, moving up the docks, hundreds of them, all walking in perfect step, all heading for shore. "Run," Lieutenant Chen said. We ran. Behind us, I could hear them following, not running, just walking, that steady, measured pace, like they had all the time in the world. We made it to the parking lot, to our cars. As I fumbled for my keys, I looked back. They'd stopped at the edge of the marina, all of them, standing in a perfect line where the dock met the land. Just watching, waiting. Dr. Harrison raised his hand, waved, a slow, deliberate wave. Then they turned around. all of them, and walked back to their boats. By morning, the boats were gone, all of them. The 17 that had returned, and all the ghost ships that had appeared. The marina was back to normal, like nothing had happened, except for one thing. In every empty slip, carved into the wood of the dock, was a message, the same message, over and over. 8 years. We'll wait. The water is warm. The official report said 43 people were lost in a tragic boating accident. Mass hallucination caused by gas leak. Grief-induced hysteria. Pick your explanation. Nobody wanted to hear the truth. I quit the next day, moved inland, far from the ocean, far from any large body of water. Miguel did the same. Lieutenant Chen, I heard she transferred to a desk job in Washington. But here's the thing that keeps me awake at night. The thing that makes me check the calendar obsessively. It's been 3 weeks since that night, and yesterday, I got a phone call, no number, just static at first, then a voice, Dr. Harrison's voice. "Jack, the water really is warm. You should come see. We're waiting for you. Slip 17. Your boat is ready." I don't own a boat, never have. But this morning, I found a key in my pocket, a boat key, with a little floating keychain that says Slip 17. I threw it away, threw it in the garbage, drove it to the dump myself, watched them bury it under tons of trash. It was back in my pocket by noon, and now, as I record this, I can feel it, the pull, like a tide in my chest, drawing me back to the marina, back to the water. I'm going to fight it, going to stay away. But I can already see how this ends. In 8 years, when the boats return again, I'll be standing on one of those decks, black eyes, pale skin, waving slowly at whoever's watching from the dock, because the water really is warm. And there's always room for one more at Slip 17. If you're listening to this, if you live near the coast, watch the boats. Watch for the pattern. October, every 8 years. And whatever you do, don't answer if they call your name. Don't pick up that phone. And if you find a boat key in your pocket, one you've never seen before, run. Run far. Run fast. Because once the ocean calls you home, you can't refuse forever. The boats always return. The crews never do. And somewhere, out there in the deep water, in that place where the continental shelf drops into darkness, something waits, something hungry, something patient, something that knows your name. Sweet dreams. And remember, check your pockets. You never know what might be waiting there, especially if you live near Marina del Rey, especially near Slip 17.